So today's guest on Lowball has played with numerous teams, including St Mirren, Stranraer, Stenhousemuir, and has had quite a few managerial experiences as well. Most recently and currently with Dumbarton. Steve Farrell. Steve, how you doing?
Good, John. How are you?
Yeah, not bad, thanks. So firstly, I suppose is the most pressing question is pre-season at the moment, but I know there's a lot of kind of cup games and stuff coming about. How have you been finding the pre-season?
It's been good. It's been good. Listen, we're probably most way through it now. We've got the Viaplay to look forward to on Saturday. Some managers use that as an extension to the pre-season because of how short our pre-seasons became. I was actually having this discussion with somebody today. When I first came back into the SPFL as a assistant manager, I think it was about 2012. We played our first League Cup game on the 29th of July. And now all of a sudden we're 2 weeks earlier now on Saturday, the 15th of July. So it seems to be getting shorter and shorter every year. But we're becoming accustomed to that, and you put your plans in place around that date of the 15th because it's normally about mid-July, John, for the last few years. So all in all, it's went well. Players have worked really hard, and probably the most important thing at this point is we're free from injury, which I'm happy to report.
Magic. And, it's just funny you kind of talk about that because it was something that I had a discussion with somebody, was it last week in regards to the kind of cup games, how with the pre-season, with a lot of people being able to have a kind of rest break and then come back, conduct your pre-season and then go into the kind of league games and then the cup kind of comes about. Have you now just find it, are you now finding it with the kind of Viaplay that you're just used to that and you just set up for that coming about?
I think you've got to. I think your recruitment's got to be planned around that as well. Because again, a discussion I was having earlier today, actually, I've had this discussion with many managers. The fact that you're not allowed trialists is difficult. It's challenging, particularly for lower league clubs. It's okay when you've got squads of 25, 30 that you can go and choose from. But for lower league clubs, firstly, in July, we're still trying to put our squads together, most part. And then secondly, if you do pick up one or two injuries and people going away on holiday with their partners maybe being involved in schools or whatever that only get their holidays this year, then you could be missing one or two players. So we've always kind of championed for trialists to be able to play in this cup. But for TV rights reasons, I believe more than any other, that they don't allow the trialists, and it's they don't allow them to take part in this competition even from the group stages. So that makes it challenging and difficult because you've got to have your squad basically assembled by the 15th of July, which at times is very, very challenging and difficult.
Yeah, and were you kind of saying that this season, obviously brilliant that you've kind of come through the pre-season for the kind of few days that are left before your cup game with no injuries? I mean, that must be kind of massive step into what's going to quickly become a busy period.
It is, John. I mean, I don't think I'll be different or much different for any other part-time club. We run about 20, 21, first team players. So if you suddenly pick up one or two injuries to that, for instance, I've got a couple already suspended, so that then takes me down to 19, and then you've thrown in a couple of keepers, you've only got 17, and if you're to throw 2 or 3 injuries into that, suddenly you're down in the realms of 13, 14. So, it can have a real impact on a squad size of what we and probably others at part-time level, carry. So having no injuries at this stage of the season is massive because it allows you to choose with some strength and depth in terms of your squad, which is pleasing as a manager.
Yeah, and with the kind of season just past there, how did you kind of come away from that feeling?
We come up just short.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. There's no running away for that. We had a very, very good. I try and look at it as objectively as I can. I could look at the final weeks of the season and be utterly disappointed, and I could look at the opening weeks and months of the season and be absolutely delirious and delighted and happy. But you try and look at it in a whole, and over the whole we had a really good season. You finished in the top two. We weren't out the top two all season, which was pleasing. And we also know that in terms of where we fell short, we probably fell short, probably in the goals that we scored. And if you look at the top goal scorers in our league, with Tommy Goss and Dale Carrick and and Kane Hester and so forth, we probably didn't have somebody of that ilk. And we knew that they're hard to come by. They're the hardest position to try and recruit every year. Every manager's looking for that player that's going to do the hardest part of the game and put the ball in the net. But ultimately, we knew we had to get more goals on our team this year, and we've tried with recruitment to target that, because we believe if we can score goals and probably the ratio a wee bit more than we did last year, then we're going to give ourselves an equal chance of having a very good season like we did in terms of last season. But last season's now gone, John. We learn the lessons from it, and we move on, and we look forward to it.
And so for the season coming, how have you found, because obviously you're talking a lot there about recruitment, how have you found that for getting ready for the season ahead?
Well, it's going to be an interesting season because, again, analysis of the league, the league's lost it. League Two has lost its top 5 goal scorers. Charlie Riley's awaited in Day. Yep. Dale, for instance, has been promoted with Stirling. Tommy Goss has been promoted with Aaron. Kane Hester's away to Montrose. So all those goal scorers that finished last season with the realms of 20 goals, they've all left the league. So now an opportunity, and I'm sure that Gary at Stennismuir or Ray Offer will be looking for that player who's going to step up and replace those players I've mentioned, and we're no different. We've tried to bring in players, I said earlier, that we think we can give an opportunity to the way we play to create chances who'll get us those vital goals at crucial times of the season. So no, looking forward to it. I'm happy with what we've built. I'm happy with the diversity I've got run about the squad, and players can play a number of positions, and that's again, when we talk about injuries and suspensions, having players that can play one or two positions, and that utility is important. So again, we've tried to build with that in mind this year also. So we've tried to be meticulous with recruitment, but listen, you never know until it kicks off and the big ball comes out, as I say.
And to kind of take a wee step back, maybe a few years ago to when you played. So when you I think you started off, was it at Kilmarnock?
I started as a kid. I could Kelly Youth, and then I went to England for there, and then developed. And I always say every club found out I was murdered, John. So,
But you must look, when you look at it then, though, I mean, because you played under obviously quite a few different managers, was there anybody that kind of left a kind of lasting impact on you?
I did, and I played not under some big names in terms of managers and previous players, but probably the one that left the biggest stamp on me was a guy that's possibly a bit unknown, is a guy called Tony Lacey, who was my youth coach at St Mirren, at Stoke City, and he went on to be a similar job with Wolverhampton Wanderers as well. Tony was a fantastic coach, way beyond his. I know people say that, but he was genuinely way beyond his years. And way probably beyond the way football was played back in the early 90s. But he gave us so much insight to the game, and and he gave me so much insight to the difference in watching the ball and watching the game, because it was a saying that he had. They're two very different things, and as I've probably matured in my coaching journey, you understand that more and more every day. In terms of what he was saying to us way back then as a 16, 17-year-old. So he was probably the guy that had the biggest impact on me in terms of, where I am now, trying to be a coach and the best coach I possibly can be with, try to develop other players. So there's a lot of what Tony taught me back then and gave me in terms of, that knowledge base that I still use to this day with players and trying to develop and coach them.
And it's obviously interesting there with the Stoke aspect. So when you look at Stoke and obviously being there with the set up there, what was the comparison like there to back up in Scotland?
Listen, I think I love where I coach, and you obviously love your country and you're patriotic, but I think England's always been that wee bit further ahead of us than and I think it's just a fact. I think sports scientists was probably introduced quicker in England than it was in Scotland in terms of analysis of Scotland, probably introduced in England before it was in Scotland. It was no different back then. We're going to England and getting into a club like Stoke City. it's a big club. Stoke City, it was a big club then. It's a big club now, and I had left Kilmarnock as a boys' club, so I'd been in about Kilmarnock, but gone for Kilmarnock Football Club at that stage to Stoke City. Again, it was a progression in terms of their habits, in terms of the processes and everything that they had in place at that time. So I just always think that the English game, for some reason, and it's through gritted teeth, but they're always just a wee bit one step ahead of us with everything that's starting to develop in the coaching and managerial and football club world.
And I mean, I suppose like the conversations that I've had with kind of different people and throughout doing this and throughout stuff previously, I think a lot of it probably just ends up coming down to cash.
It does. I mean, listen, the English game is awash with money. The pyramid system is slightly, and I say that facetiously. It's slightly different for our pyramid system. You look at the money that comes down the pyramid in Scotland in comparison to England. It's two different models. But ultimately it's born out by the commercial aspect. The commercial animal in England is completely different in terms of the TV revenue and commercial partners. In terms of you look at some of the major sponsors in England, they're completely different to that of Scotland. And we do very, very well for the size of nation we are. But sometimes you look with envy on particularly the lower leagues where we operate, and what they're receiving in terms of budgets and that flow of cash coming down the way in the lower leagues in England to what we've got in Scotland, because it is materially different, John.
Yeah, and I think because that's where I kind of looked at it and thought, and irrespective of it, which side of the fence a lot of people sit on, when Rangers went down and they had to get back through the leagues, was probably for a lot of the clubs that they came up against a bit of a blessing, because they were getting the gates, they were getting TV rights, which prior to that they would never have had.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, I was fortunate enough, me and Stephen were at Stranraer during that spell, and then we went to Dumbarton, and Rangers, we caught Rangers in the Championship as well, and to have a club like Rangers, they're coming through the leagues, it was a fantastic experience for low league clubs, because with the greatest respect in the world, normally low league clubs would only get the chance to play the Old Firm in a cup competition in a one-off, but you were getting the opportunity to play Rangers 4 times a season, both home and away. So it was an opportunity to go and test yourself against, let's put it, one of the 2 biggest clubs in the country, with the best players. But it was also, in terms of the cash revenue, it was so helpful to a lot of clubs at that time, John. And particularly, the fact that we seen what came after that a few years later in COVID, and it hit clubs financially. So I would suggest that probably around about that time, the money was made for even those 4 games and or certainly the 2 home games for a lot of clubs went a long way to helping them financially at that time. So I don't underestimate what Celtic and Rangers bring in relation to when you're able to pull them, you're able to get them through the gate. But the issue that I do have is in terms of the model and in terms of the money that comes down the way for that model in Scotland. It needs restructured. I'm not the only one to say that. Other people have said it, and it certainly needs reviewed. So, but that's going to be people that's paid a lot more money than we are to determine that.
And you're 100% right, because I've had discussions on this with ex-players, ex-managers, like current directors, and the kind of outlook and the view on it is very much the same outlook and view as yours is, in regards to how it kind of works down the way. Because I think, what was it, one of them had says that when you collectively look at the amount of supporters, if you take Rangers and Celtic out the equation, every other team from the 3rd team down collectively would bring more supporters to a stadium than Rangers and Celtic would. Yet the money doesn't siphon down in any kind of similar way.
Good point. It's a very good point.
And when you looked at, if we kind of look back onto like your career as well, when you came away from Stoke and it was St Mirren you went to, was it a good feeling after being at Stoke to then come back?
It was good, John. Obviously, it was the best thing I ever done. Again, I've said that in many interview. Going to England as a 16-year-old, it it taught me so much about the game. It taught me so much about life, and it matured me very, very quickly. But I had the opportunity to come back up. I think it was 4.5 years at Stoke, and I had the opportunity to come back up with Jimmy Bowen and St Mirren. And to this day, Jimmy's somebody I've got the utmost respect for. I love playing under him. He was that old school mentality, but you knew where you stood with him. He was always transparent and fair, and I had a fantastic relationship, and I liked working with people like that who you always knew where you stood, and that's the one thing I could always say about Jimmy Bowen. And I was fortunate enough. As a young lad, he played me a lot. He trusted me, and with good players, and Chick Charnley, Paul Lamberts of this world. I was the midfield three for a long time that season, so it was good. It was good to get that opportunity to come, because I'd played with Stoke City's first team, but I had never been a regular as a kid. But Jimmy gave me that opportunity to become a regular in the first team in an established at that time Championships and Mum team. So no, it was good, and I enjoyed my time there.
And when you look at, obviously your kind of playing days and what you'd learned, but the transition from becoming a manager, was that an easy transition for you to do?
I mean, it took the player manager's job at Cumberland Juniors, and looking back in it now, I'm glad I did it. But if somebody was to ask me advice, 14 years later, John, would you become a player manager, or should I become a player manager? I would say no. Although I did it, and although I enjoyed it, I found it very, very challenging, because as a player, and everybody will tell you this, you prepare as a player all week as an individual, but suddenly as a player manager, you're preparing as an individual, and not just the 15 or 16 other players. You're also thinking about the opposition, you're thinking about the chairman, you're thinking about the committee, you're thinking about everything at the football club. And I always found that had a massive demand on you as a player manager. So actually, when I made the decision to stop playing and just concentrate on the management, it was the best decision I made, because it gave me an opportunity to just focus on the journey that was the next journey in my career as such, coming away from playing. And I've got to say I enjoyed it thereafter, I really did.
And I suppose I've got to ask, when you're a player manager and you're on the park playing, does your outlook towards any referee bad decisions change?
I was never keen on referees, to be fair. I don't think they were keen on me either. So I think that's still the case. It's just every day will be different, but I just felt that you couldn't fully concentrate on one or the other. I fully couldn't concentrate on playing as a player, and I fully couldn't concentrate on being a manager. And I always felt I was somewhere in between. And that was me as an individual. I'm very much that whatever I'm doing, I need to be fully committed to. And I never felt as a player manager I could, because I always felt somewhere stuck in the middle between the two roles, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of similar, because recently Darren Young was on, and when he was speaking about it, he was very much the same. When he played, it was very difficult to, as a player, you're kind of trying to look about everywhere, and it was a lot more reliant on the assistant and trying to focus in the playing. And I think he was kind of the same on the being caught in, am I a player, am I a manager?
Yeah, listen, I wish he'd have been a player manager last year, and we might have tipped him to the title. But well, listen, Dan, he did a fantastic job, and we're deserved winners of our league last year. And it's interesting that Dan feels the same, because one or two. I remember speaking to Derry McInnes when he did it at St Johnstone as well, and he felt the same as well. But as I say, Rhys McCabe might be, because he's the only one I can think is doing it just now. But he might find it completely different now, and it would be interesting to hear his thoughts on it.
I suppose it's easy though when you're succeeding. It's very easy to say that it's great and it's working.
Absolutely, that's a fair point. That's like everything in life, isn't it? When it's gone well, that and the ship's going in the right direction, then it's probably an easier one to steer. But it becomes a wee bit more difficult to steer when it's tough and you've got challenging times. And that's where I always felt, in between the two roles, I wasn't giving my complete to either of them. So that's where I made the decision to stop my playing career and concentrate on the management coaching side of things.
And when you done that, were you still at Cumnock when you decided to do that?
Yeah, I'd just taken the job. Campbell Money had went away, and they'd asked me to take the player manager's job, which I did. I think I continued to be a player manager for the entire season, and then we had been promoted that year, I think, into the Premier League, and that's when I made the decision to play no longer. I just felt even although we had a fairly successful season in getting the club promoted, I just felt that I hadn't been 100% in either of the positions, if I'm being truly honest with myself and self-reflecting. And that's when, at the end of that season, I made the decision to call it a day, playing wise.
And because you stayed at Cumnock for a kind of few years between the kind of player manager and then the manager role, when you moved on from there, was it for kind of a different opportunity?
That's when Stephen Aiken came to me for Stranraer to be his assistant. And you know, sometimes, well, most times, assistant managers will go the other way and go become a manager. So you don't normally see managers becoming assistant managers, but I just felt the fact that I'd been a manager and a player manager for a couple of years, and I felt when Stephen had given me that opportunity, my reflection was as such that I felt I could help him, because I felt the fact that I'd been there as a manager, I knew exactly what I felt he would have needed for me as an assistant, and I felt that I could give up that to him. And I liked Stephen, you know, when I went to meet him a couple of times before I took the job, and I just got a good gut feeling that we could work well together. And you know, with the greatest respect in the world, I think we formed a decent enough partnership at lower league level, and you know, we had quite a successful time at Stranraer at that time.
And when you kind of decided to stop being the assistant and move back into management, was there anything that kind of sparked that, or?
Probably the club. John, the fact that me and Stephen had been at Stranraer and then went, you know, as I said there previously, they had quite a successful time together, and some really good times and good days. And you're right, you know, as you said earlier, they're the good ones are the ones you remember. And you know, we were fortunate that probably between 2012 and 2015 that it was a really, really good time for Stranraer, in terms of, you know, we were in League One, probably punching above our weight, and we were challenging for league titles and the playoffs every year in League One for a club like Stranraer was very, very good. So you know, the fans enjoyed that, the board enjoyed it, and Stephen enjoyed it, the players enjoyed it. So it was a good time to be at the club. And then we went in Dumbarton, we had a fantastic time, and you know, we were going about our work just normal, and we were in the Championship and challenging and working really, really hard with the difficult league that was. And then I got the call for Stranraer to see if I'd be interested in becoming a manager. And I think what I've just said previously there about the times and my recollections, Stranraer had a big pull on me to go back and see if I could manage the club and get some of those days back.
And how did you feel when you went back?
I felt great for 6 months because we were challenging again, and then you know, I've said this previously, and it's a fact. You know, the financial position at the football club changed. You know, just about December time that year, and the club was under real financial pressures for the banks and so forth. So we had to sell a number of players at that time, and quite frankly, the club had to then move to a different, you know, budget model, which I still think they're suffering for that to this day. In terms of, you know, that structure and that financial structure had to change. But you know, I can't speak highly enough of Stranraer. I can't speak highly. They're a club who I hope they always remain in the SPFL and continue to challenge and, you know, go and improve, because I wish nothing but good luck for them, because they're a very, very good club who work under immense financial restraints and continue to probably overachieve. And I even, you know, look at it this year and last year and the year before, the fact that they're still competing in the SPFL with a budget, with the greatest respect, that probably is probably comparator to some in the lower end of the West of Scotland League. It just tells you what a good job's getting done at Stranraer with Jamie Hamill and new Scott Agnew and all the board, the committee at that football club.
And now to kind of be where you are, was that again just another opportunity, another phone call that came your way?
It was Dumbarton that came for me. We'd played Dumbarton in the semi-final of promotion playoffs, and they touched us off, and I thought that was us. Our summer was done, and we were going to start building, and we had started building. Myself and Frank McEwen, who became assistant at that time, for the season ahead with Stranraer, and then I got the call for Stranraer chairman. They said Dumbarton had been in touch and wanted to speak to me, and again, I can't speak highly enough of the people at Dumbarton. I've been fortunate to be involved with two very, very good clubs in the SPFL, and two clubs that treat people the right way. They treat you the right way, and they're very honest and transparent. And Colin Hosey, who I'd known from my time at Dumbarton, who's the vice chairman, he made the call, and I went and met with him, and they told me what the plans were. They told me where they thought we could get a plan together for the next 3-4 years, and see if we could restructure the club somewhat and just take the club in a direction that was a wee bit different from where it was when I went back. So, we started that. We got relegated last year, and that didn't surprise me, because when we were honest and having the honest chat when I took the job, I felt that where we were financially in comparison to League One, because League One's changed in the last 5 or 6 years, John.
Yeah.
It's became a completely different animal to what it was with the time that I spoke about there with Stranraer and some of the teams and some of the financial budgets that are in that league now. So I think
there's about 4 or 5 full-time teams in it now as well.
It's I mean, you've got Queen of the South in there, you've now got Hamilton dropping in there, you have Cove Rangers in there. It's completely different to what it was in 2013-14 when I was talking about Stranraer overachieving in League One. So, and just prior to me going back to Dumbarton had flirted with kind of 8th and 9th for 2 or 3 seasons, and it was just a season too much. You keep flirting with the bottom, 2 or 3 places. Eventually, you're going to find yourself in them. But the one thing that we've did is, I think we've now restructured the club in terms of having people in 2-year deals and have a wee bit more of a consistency and longevity approach to what we're trying to do at Dumbarton now. So hopefully that pays dividends over the next season or two.
Because I suppose that's one of the things that you don't see as much of in the Law League. And I suppose the question to ask you is that because of finances and budgets, with longer term deals not really being a big thing?
I think that's just, I can't speak for other clubs, but certainly clubs I've been at, that was the sole reason. I think the fact now that the legislation's changed somewhat, that players now receive their contracts used to be over a shorter period of time, and then the summer months, you normally, years gone by, you didn't pay players because the contract ended after the last game of the season. But now that you're contractually, and rightly so, got to pay the player through the 52 weeks of the season, you're having to pay a player 52 weeks regardless. So ultimately, just one runs into another. So to now have longer term deals, and I know the Montrose have went that model with 2 and 3 year deals, and other clubs were both went that model. It makes sense because it does give you that consistency and that longevity and that familiarisation with players at your club, and obviously it builds that continuity. So more and more clubs are doing it, and that's what's allowed them to do it, is because of the contracts now are extended to 52 weeks.
And I suppose as a manager, I'd imagine that to be a lot easier when guys that are kind of finishing the season, you'll have your kind of core of players there, and then know the areas that you need to look at and work on.
As a manager, and any manager will tell you, continuity is key. It's key. If you continue to rip up 20 players every season and then start again, you might have a season or two where that'll go really well and everything comes together, and you're very, very lucky and fortunate that you get the right 20 and you free for injury and free for suspension. But that's not a model that's going to build sustainability. You're not going to have that, John. You're more likely to have a model that's going to build sustainability and success when it's built around people been in the building a lot longer than 12 months. So it's certainly from a manager's point of view, it's something that I think, speaking on behalf of most managers, we would rather have that longer term contract tied up.
And one of the kind of last kind of questions that I had, and I suppose it's easier to ask yourself with being in kind of both sides of it, when you're a manager or when you're an assistant manager, what is it that, so as an assistant manager, if you're going to be getting in as somebody's number 2, is there kind of elements, I suppose more so on a personal front, because I know everybody will be different, that you look for, but then at the same time, if you're a manager, how do you pick your assistant?
I think I think you would, asking any manager, you've got to pick very, very wisely, because I think the one thing that you want more than anything is somebody you can trust. You don't necessarily want somebody who's going to agree with you all the time. You need somebody who's going to challenge you. You need somebody that will challenge you and accepts and understands that although they may challenge you, that as manager, you ultimately will make that final decision and they support that. It depends what you're looking for in your number two, where you want them on the grass in terms of coaching and the training field and having that impact, of what amount of impact you want them to have in the grass. What you want to look for them, run about the recruitment side of things. Are they going to work closely in the recruitment? So there's a number of factors. I think you need as a manager to understand what your structure looks like within your own head, and then it's about trying to find the right person who fits into that. And I think if you can do that and get somebody you believe is the right person, but somebody who believe that you can trust, then you're probably very, very fortunate.
Yeah. And when you're looking at the season ahead, is that very much, do you look at that? I know everybody's different, but is it game by game? Do you look at per quarter, or do you have a kind of overall view?
No, listen. I think when you look at the lower leagues are very, very rarely will one team, probably apart from Celtic Hearts recently, Queen's Park, there'll be a full-time club comes in and, because of the resources they've got and, good managers, good players, that they'll probably run away with the league. But on the whole, we probably look at it quarterly, because you look at probably most leagues will be won, and probably I say League One and League Two round about that 70-point mark. Most promotional playoffs will be run about that probably 54 point to get into the top four. And then obviously relegation wise, you're probably looking at that 39-40 to be safe. So I think regardless of what your aspirations are for the year, and every club's different, you will look at that built in a quarter. What do you need to get? So if you're looking to win the league, you probably need to get that 17, 18 points per quarter. Looking to get in the playoffs, you need to get that, probably that 40, 13, 14 a quarter. And then if you're looking to avoid relegation, you need to get that probably 10 and 11 a quarter. So I think most clubs will look at it in that quarterly basis rather than game by game.
And looking ahead, because obviously we've kind of touched on the kind of lower leagues and the team that come through. And I know when I've had the conversation with different people, everybody's obviously got their own opinion on it and their own outlook. With the structure and the kind of lowland leagues coming up, is that something that you thought was a good idea?
I think it's a good idea. I think, me personally, so this is only Stevie Farrell. This is no Stevie Farrell for Dumbarton or Dumbarton's views. This is Stevie Farrell's views. I think the leagues need to be bigger. I think there needs to be more variety in terms of who you play, when you play. I think playing the same clubs 4 times becomes a bit monotonous. I think if you were to increase the league sizes, I think, for instance, if you were to increase the Premier League, suddenly you bring in the Ayrshire Derby. You bring in the Dundee Derby, you'd have the Edinburgh Derby, you'd have a couple of Glasgow Derbies in there. So I actually just think commercially as well, by increasing the leagues, you would probably open up a better product. And then the lower leagues, again, if you were to give opportunity for the leagues to be bigger in the lower side of the game, then that's going to open up your Lowland League and your West of Scotland League to become closer to where they want to be in relation to the SPFL. So I just think that there's a full root and branch required to look at it, the commercial side, i.e. what makes the world go round, i.e. in football is the money, and also against what the product, what the clubs are looking for in terms of their aspirations as football clubs.
Yeah. And just kind of finally to touch on, if you're looking at we'll start from the Championship. So if you were looking at the Championship just now and you were asked, to pick a team that you think will win it or will definitely, in your eyes, be there or thereabouts, who would you pick out?
I think, I mean, I know they've lost a few players, and Chris's went in there, Chris Doolan's went in there to Partick and did really, really well towards the end of the season. And I thought towards the end of the season they were looking at a really, really good side. You know, Kyle Turner, who I worked with, and he's now in Ross County, and they've lost the lad Dockery and the boy Kevin Holty to the United, and they'll be big losses. But if his recruitment's right and he replaces them, I still think he's got a really, really good nucleus there to go and challenge and have a successful season. Lee Bullen, I believe, they were unfortunate last year. And also, it'll be interesting to see how the Queen's Park model goes. They've come in and they're going to go with more the kind of in-house, youth structure and try and develop their own players. So it'll be really interesting to see how that model fits in relation to against the other clubs within the championship. So no, it'll be interesting. But I think Partick Thistle, if I was to pick one, I think it would be Partick Thistle would be probably the one I'll be most interested to follow this season.
And then if we drop down to League One.
Well, listen, you've got Dunfermline. I've just went out of there. I mean, I think Falk. I've got a lot of time for John McGlynn. And I thought he did fantastically well to get Falkirk to the semi-finals of Scottish. That probably had an impact on the league position, or final league position, in terms of with the squad, as I mentioned earlier, and those games and big games and the demands that put. That probably curtailed the league position a wee bit. But I certainly believe that Falkirk are a big football club and probably a club that's got real desire in the Premier League, never mind the Championship. So I think possibly this might be the year that Falkirk under John, are successful and get us out of League One.
And just to quickly touch on there, it's interesting to mention also about the cup run, possibly having a wee bit of an impact. As a manager, I know it must be great to have the kind of cup wins and cup runs and everything else, but do you ever find the pressure on it then stretching your squad?
Oh, it does, John. I mean, listen, I can't speak for John McGlynn. He's somebody I've got a lot of respect for, worked against a number of times over the years. So, but I'm sure if you asked John, he would be the first to tell you that. That cup run, although how fantastic it was, it probably had a real impact on the squad and the strength and depth, and they probably stretched and were stretched towards the end because you were asking good players to play a lot of the big games, and you want your best players and your top players playing in all those big games. But ultimately, when they're playing in all those big games, success sometimes can be a downfall. And I think, the fact that they were playing in as many big games toward the end of the season with the cup at the heart of it, possibly it hurt them a wee bit with the size of squad and the real quality they had and depth and strength and depth in the league campaign.
And I suppose I would be completely stupid if I asked you who's going to win League Two.
Well, listen, I think there's fantastic teams in League Two, and I'm not being patronising or condescending there. I think there's some really, really good sides in League Two who all have aspirations, whether that be Forfar, Stennismuir, ourselves, Stranraer, whoever it may well be, will all believe. I think League Two is possibly the closest. I think it's the most competitive. I don't see there being a standout team that's got real financial resources beyond that of anybody else. And I believe that everybody is capable in their day of being successful and picking up results. But we had a good season last year. I stand by that, and I believe that if we can add that consistency that we had last year, and keep that consistency and just add one or two bigger performances when it's needed, then hopefully we'll be right up there when the prizes are getting handed out.
And I definitely agree with that because I follow a lot of the low league football, and I happened to go to Albion Rovers when Stirling Albion went there as champions, and Albion Rovers beat them. I know, speaking to Dan, they had a few players out. I think says we're missing about 6 or 7. But the team that got relegated beat the champs in the last game of the season. So it definitely, if on that performance that I seen for Rovers, I thought, how are they in the position they're in?
I thought the same last year, Brian and Sandy will not think I'm being, condescending at all when I say this, but they were one of the better sides we played. they were the 4 of the toughest games we had. They turned us over at Dumbarton 5-0, and it could have been 10 that day. If I'm being honest, Charlie Riley was on fire. The wee boy Cammy Wilson, who I've signed this year myself, was excellent. The boy Bevan were just too much for us that day. And even the 3 games that we beat them last season, they were all tough affairs. They were all difficult. We had to grind out results against them because they had a style and a way of playing that made it difficult. And then at the top end of the pitch with Bevan, Riley, and Wilson, they had 3 really good players at this level. So, you know, Albion Rovers can count themselves unfortunate over the course of the season that they did get relegated because, you know, Stirling, whether it be Stirling, whether it be us, they certainly gave many a team in our division a game on their day last season.
And I mean, I suppose that's the thing as well, because where they've dropped down, I mean, that league in itself is very competitive. I think there's a few teams in that people maybe just off the cuff expected to have come right back up quite quickly. But, you know, a lot of your teams, like your Cowdenbeaths and stuff, show that it's not as easy to get out that league as what was maybe first thought.
No, you're right. You're right. It's you're going into a league there where, you know, where there's clubs coming up the way and they've got real aspirations to go and be in the SPFL. So football doesn't wait an empty, John. It doesn't matter what level you play. It doesn't wait an empty. It keeps evolving. It keeps moving on. There's new kids in the block always just waiting around the corner, you know. And Trinent will believe this year it could be their year. East Kilbride will believe it could be their year. Sandy Clark dropping in with Albion Rovers. If he recruits right, he'll believe he could possibly be one of the first teams that go straight back up. And, you know, so it's going to be really, really competitive, the Lowland League. And then obviously you've got Linlithgow Rose coming into it for the east of Scotland as well. So who I believe are a very good side. I've been spoken to 1 or 2 people who's played against them last season. So it makes for another really competitive Lowland League. And then obviously you've still got the B teams, although they're not competing in that this year in terms of Rangers and Celtic. So is that going to open it up, you know, to others to get the opportunity to go and stake a claim to go and win that league? You know, yeah. It'll be very interesting.
So I think, and just kind of final part, we talk about it. Do you feel like the kind of gates and the crowd, you know, at this level, have you found that in the years that you've been in kind of fluctuating a lot?
I think football's like any business. It's got to be competitive, John. Do you know, at the end of the day, football's a product, and whether it's an Albion Rovers board of directors, or whether it's Dumbarton board of directors, whether it's Rangers or whatever it may well be, you want people in your ground on a Saturday afternoon. But there's so many more options open to football fans these days. Do you know, there's so many alternatives to a Saturday afternoon, and we need to ask ourselves a question: are we competitive to those alternatives? Do you know, are we that option that people are going to come and watch us on a Saturday rather than go to, you know, a shopping arcade or the local, you know, swimming baths or whatever it may well be, you know, the local shopping centre. There's just so many different options for people these days commercially, and ultimately, you know, people then, you know, think about their wallet and their purses and how much does it cost. And, you know, you hear people saying that League One and League Two is better value for money than the Premier League because of the differential in costs. But then you hear the West of Scotland, and you'll have heard this, the West of Scotland and the Lowland League saying they're a better product than the SPFL League Two because of the differential in cost. So it's about trying to market your football club against all the other options and alternatives that some fans may have. It's so that you try and entice them through your front door every Saturday, because as you say, getting them through one Saturday or 2 Saturdays is not enough. It's like, get back to that, you know, that sustainability when we're talking about building squads. It's about building fan bases, and you want it to be sustainable and growth and potential for growth every year. And if I'm being honest, I don't think there's many clubs have got that model right.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say if you're looking about, it's probably the most difficult kind of model to get right. But, you know, seeing the kind of changes and the stuff going on, it's to kind of hope that it continues. You know, I travel about a lot of different football grounds across the kind of lower leagues and stuff, and that's probably, and if I'm being honest, it's the one thing that I would say always maintains is you look about and you go, whereas, you know, half the ground's empty. But you know, I've started to see kind of slight changes and it cannot. But you'll probably know a lot better than I will that when your team's winning, it's easier to fill that ground a bit more than the kind of loyal fans that will come out regardless of the weather, even if the results aren't going their way.
No, you're right. You're right. But listen, we had that discussion at Stranraer a number of years ago. As I say, Steve and I were fortunate to be in charge of a group of players who were a really good group of players at that time, and we were winning more games than we were losing for a club like Stranraer you know, in that probably 2.5 year spell. But when you looked at the crowd and the fan base, it was still probably the same as it is today and last year and the year before. It wasn't much differential because people were still choosing the other option, and that other option in Stranraer was getting on a bus to go up to Parkhead or going to Ibrox. Do you know,
Yeah.
that was their alternative, do you know, and it was and people have got that right of choice. So sometimes I even think when football clubs are winning, it's still not enough. Do you know, and it's about trying to entice probably a different generation now, and because I think some generations now are lost to the local provincial clubs, but it's about how you try and market yourself with the new generation. You know, get run about the schools, or put offers in place, and get that new young person through the gates, and hopefully you can keep them coming. You know, from a 10-year-old right through to a 50, 60-year-old. You know, that's the key. That's the key. But you know, that's where commercial people get paid and commercial directors get paid all this money in it.
Yeah. And the final question I've got for you, which I do like to ask because of some of the answers that we get, is if you had to pick somebody to play you in a film about your life and your career, who would you pick?
Oh, that's a great question. It's a great question. I mean, if I was to go in my favourite actor, I mean, my favourite actor is De Niro. So, you know, I don't see him playing as you know, a football player, in a Lowland League football player in Scotland. Nobody's heard of. You know, the majority of people have not heard of. I don't see him taking that gig, but certainly in terms of being able to act it, then there's no many better actors than him.
That's the first time I've had De Niro, but it's honestly a great choice. Look, I really appreciate you taking the time today. All the best for next season. Hopefully, we're sitting here this time next season talking about promotion and having just been promoted. So I really do appreciate you coming on. I'll definitely be out. As I say, I travel about all the grounds and I'll be out to see a game and definitely look forward to it.
No, brilliant, John. Make sure you do.
Perfect.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Take care.